Boom. Give me another one.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning.
Oh, another burp.
How are you?
I'm good. No, I don't burp on cue. So,
Do you have the ability to burp on cue?
No, I have.
Oh, we came on just too late then. I almost got it.
Well, we're gonna go the better part of an hour and a half, most likely. So you got to watch your. I would take in a bunch more liquid all of a sudden here to try to, but that's not a good idea.
Is it the coffee that makes you burp, or what is it?
It was the water.
Okay, all right. Well, whatever I can do to make it more enjoyable for you.
Thank you. You have. So we're in the studio again this morning, and Travis has made many improvements, most of which I'm going to leave to your imagination because they involve the bathroom, but thanks for all that.
You're welcome for the trash can.
And but we have he's got a French press coffee and coffee supplies, and this place we're going to open up a cafe here pretty soon.
We might, charge for admission. Why not?
Just whatever the name is on the outside of the building, just put cafe after it.
I should, right? That'll work.
It'll be as much of make as much sense as Couch Funeral. So.
By the way, you didn't even notice.
I did. I actually did notice.
You didn't say anything.
No, I didn't say anything.
I'm wearing the Couch Funeral T-shirt today.
Yeah, it looks good.
I don't think I've ever worn one.
No?
I mean, I wore one the day we got them, but, now still official promotion.
I thought maybe
mode.
this was just in your regular lineup of T-shirts now that you wear.
It is. It was at the bottom of the pile. I do have a box here, of course, under the table of Couch Funeral T-shirts.
Oh, you still have more?
Yeah, I have a few more, so
Awesome.
we'll have to give them out.
Couch Funeral hats.
Is that if I get you a Couch Funeral hat, will you wear it?
A hat, yes. I don't wear T-shirts, but that's because, I'm just too fat. So.
Well, you always said you don't wear T-shirts that have something printed on them.
Well, I would wear a comfortable shirt. Here's the thing: T-shirts aren't very comfortable for me. But I mean, like if the Couch Funeral thing was on the back of this shirt, I would wear it. I don't wear anything on the front. That's just not me.
But you wouldn't wear a T-shirt with like a Nike swoosh on it or something?
No,
because you think it's not comfortable?
Mostly because it's a T-shirt. I don't want anything up around the bottom of my neck.
You know what you should get would be a kind of a combination between a T-shirt and the polo that you always wear, is a henley. You know what a henley is?
No. What's a henley?
It's basically a combination of a T-shirt and a polo. It's a
T-shirt with a V-neck.
Yes, but it has buttons. So it's
a golf shirt without a collar.
Kind of, but I don't think they're not just for golf, but they have long sleeve and short sleeve henleys, and they have like 3 buttons, so you can open it up and show your manliness, but it has no collar like a polo. I wore a polo for the first time this weekend in probably 2 years. Went golfing with the wife.
Really? You don't wear polo shirts? I never noticed.
No, I
wear other shirts.
I'll wear like a button down shirt, but I don't like
sleeve.
Polo shirts. Yeah, polos are like fucking annoying as shit.
It's okay. It's all I wear.
I mean, it looks good on you, though.
It's the only shirt I want to wear.
Well, hey, listen, you were telling me right before we came on, I don't want to give away too much, but you're telling me about an Alzheimer's story, right?
Okay.
And I'm just wondering, I'm being serious
Dementia.
now. Dementia. Yeah. So that's kind of what I was going to get into.
Yeah.
What is... I joke a lot about our dear president, Mr. Biden, and his ailments, which he has many, and whatever.
So just clarification for the audience, that is Travis saying that becoming old is an ailment. Just FYI.
Is it not?
The ageism is running rampant this morning. Go ahead.
Becoming old, you develop ailments, right?
Yes. Doesn't mean he has any.
Biden?
Yeah.
Oh, clearly he does. Do you want me to find some Biden clips for you this morning?
Oh God, no. Can I stipulate, like when you're in a court case, can I just stipulate to the fact that sometimes mush comes out of his mouth because hey, here's a newsflash. Has a stuttering problem. So ageism and handicapped intolerance. So we're off to a good start. Is there a Trump guest coming on this morning?
I read another report this weekend about somebody conspiracy keeping it hush hush that Trump has, is it Alzheimer's?
Oh, good.
Which, who knows if that's true.
Oh my God. It's unfortunate that the focus on the left wing now seems to be how much influence does or doesn't Trump have. And so this thing with Liz Cheney is all over the news, the last few days, the last week or something. So it's it's the cancel culture, right? That they're so upset about that the it's not even, I'm not even going to call them conservatives anymore. That the
Republican Party,
the whole Republican Party, the party of Trump, has said for so long, has been used by liberals to squelch the free speech of conservatives. And yet here, I mean, they are practicing right now. They are engaged in the biggest cancel. Well, I could have done another burp right there. The biggest cancel, that they've done. Kevin McCarthy, first time I got it right.
Yep.
The minority speaker in the House, is not supporting Liz Cheney in her. She has the number 3 leadership position in their party, for whatever that means. And just a few weeks ago, he supported her in an attempt to take her down out of that post. But now, because she refuses to participate in the nonsense about the election that Trump continues to talk about in Mar-a-Lago, they are going to cancel her and take her out. They're going to put in. Oh, now I'm not going to remember her name. Have you got her name? So they're going to put in. So here's the thing. She voted in lockstep. She's not my favorite person. She voted in lockstep for Trump proposals 97% of the time during his 4 years. They're going to replace her with
somebody who votes 103% for Trump.
50% of the time. So it's not even about policy. It's not about conservative credentials.
Well, they just don't like her.
Well, she is refusing to go along with the nonsense about the election, and has said publicly, that she thinks the whole thing is a big lie, that there was no fraud and he didn't win the election, it hasn't been stolen from him, none of that. She's not going along with any of that because it's just not true, and she's not going to bend to it just to be in lockstep with.
Is that what they're demanding, though, that she fall on her sword and say that it is true?
Absolutely. A few weeks ago, after the January 6th thing, there was a call. Well, and she voted to impeach Trump, right? She's one of the few Republican senators that had a conscience and lived up to her oath. She listened to the evidence at the impeachment and voted to impeach him because it was indisputable, and so because of that, there was a move to replace
That's being
her.
disputed, folks.
Yeah, and so what they wanted her to do then was to shut up. Okay,
if you think this way, just don't say it publicly.
Yeah, just stop talking about it, and she's not doing that because she doesn't like the way that the Republican Party is continuing to push this anti-democratic election fraud nonsense. She feels it's dangerous. I mean, her feelings on that are almost identical to mine. I doubt seriously if I agree with her about anything else on this planet, considering her voting record. But I mean, they're actually going to replace her with a senator, a junior senator and she's been working on this. This gal has been working on this replacing Liz Cheney for quite a while. I mean, she's been lobbying. She's been kissing the ring. She's just going along with her, and she just says, "Hey, Trump is." She's on tour with Matt Gaetz, the human trafficking sex pervert.
Didn't we establish though that was he trafficking people or his buddy?
Both of them together.
Did we establish that?
Yeah, he's that investigation is ongoing, and so he's out with our other favorite, Marjorie
Taylor Greene.
Is that her name?
I think so.
Taylor Greene. So he's touring with her. What a,
Don't you think that is one of the biggest problems with politics, in the sense that you have these two major political parties, and really instead of governing and making laws, or what I would like to see is eliminating laws, because there's too many fucking laws on what we can do and can't do, but instead it's like a fraternity, right? You come in here and because you have the red flag or the blue flag, you're supposed to vote the way we vote. You're supposed to do everything the way we want you to do. And if you don't, very much like, old school bullshit peer pressure, we're going to take action against you. We're going to sanction you. We're going to remove you from your post because you're not doing what we want you to do. It's bullshit.
All of that could be legitimate if it was about policy, right? Hey, here is the Republican platform. Here are the policies that as a as a group we believe in. But that's not what this is about with Liz Cheney and Mitt Romney. This is about, hey, if you won't get on board and lie with the rest of us about the whole Trump situation.
But why now? What good does it do them to continue that narrative now?
Well, I think that they feel that they can't win in 22
unless the base gets angry and thinks that they still have work to do to right the wrong.
They're in a conundrum. I mean, what they saw in 20 was a lot of people voting for Biden that then voted for down ballot Republicans. So they gained some seats in the Senate, right? Or in the House rather. And so I think they're confused by that, right? They're not sure what's going to happen. And now you have several Republican states engaged in this, at breakneck speed trying to, pass state legislation that will inhibit people's ability to vote, especially people of color. And so they're all engaged in all that. That's Florida, Georgia, Texas, for sure, those three. We'll see who else gets on board. There's plenty more suspects, working on it. So obviously they're concerned that if they don't eliminate some people of color off the voter rolls by the next election, they're not going to be able to move forward. So they're heavily engaged in that. This Marjorie Taylor Greene and Matt Gaetz, who are repulsive reptilian pieces of shit, right? But they are embraced and allowed to go on their whatever it is, their pro-Trump, pro-big lie tour, whatever they're calling it. I mean, the idea that the Republican Party would allow Matt Gaetz and Marjorie Taylor Greene, who they damn near stripped her of being on any. Oh, I think they did take her off.
I think so too,
right? Because they're repulsive, right? They're repugnant. Marjorie Taylor Greene, for her actual actions, she's a QAnon white supremacist.
But hang on, let me interject here, because this is what I always say about that particular element. About you use the word allow, and then you say things like they were removed from. So this is, I'm not defending those positions, but just kind of more thinking out loud. And because she's in the House, right? She's in the House of Representatives, and there's way too many of them, as we've discussed. But she was sent there by her constituents, right? So when you remove her, when you sanction her, when you have a greater body, whatever, the Republican Party take action against that, aren't you also, it's not just the individual, what does that say about the people that sent her there? Is it not the belief that all those people, and I don't know how many people are in her district, feel the same way? So it's more of a question. Is there outrage that there have been those actions taken against her, or are her constituents abandoning her too? Or do you know?
Well, I think that the actions taken against her were repercussions for specific repugnant public statements that at the time the Republicans did not feel represented them well. And so
Well,
she's part of a caucus. Regardless of whether there's a group of people in a state that voted to send her there, they send her to be part of the caucus, right? And that caucus works as a unified body. And so
can you not have a dissenting voice in a unified body?
You can't have a reptilian disgusting.
What constitutes a reptilian disgusting?
Well, look,
point?
Outright racist, white supremacist, statements, stupid QAnon bullshit.
Does it all have to be policy? I mean, in other words, I saw another tweet this weekend I thought was kind of funny. And Ted Cruz posted something that said it was like a Happy Mother's Day card. And then instead of mothers, it was crossed out and it said like Happy Birthing People's Day or something. And he meant it as a joke, which, because
it's okay.
Right. The accusation is, hey, all these PC lefties, you can't say mothers because you got to be politically correct. But then everybody took a shit on it because it's like, oh, you're, whatever the fucking word is, against him. But it was meant to be a joke, and of course they didn't get it. But it had nothing to do with policy, right? So
Ted Cruz is that kid in class that tries to be funny and then isn't, and everybody in the class just kind of looks and like, shut the fuck up.
Maybe, but and again, that kind of comment, I don't know much about him in that sense. Where is his head? Is he trying to
don't open that door for me.
No, is he trying to just make waves? Is he trying to get under people's skin? Does he think he's funny?
He thinks he's funny. That's my opinion on that. I didn't hear about that.
Well, I thought that was funny
from the way you describe it. Wow.
And I think I got that right. I hope I didn't step on the joke. I think it was happy birthing people's day.
Yeah, that makes sense. That seems like the kind of extreme that people that get bent about peace. Look, most of this stuff just results from people trying to limit the ways that people can just bully other people with their over their difference of opinion. And you take a guy like Ted Cruz, it's not about, hey, let's have a discussion. He couldn't come on this program and roll with us. He's just a dogmatic.
Well, that's an interesting question, because people, and maybe he could, maybe he couldn't.
Right.
But the people who can't usually, like you said, are so dogmatic that they just want to repeat whatever their talking points are, whatever the party line messaging is, and can they actually have a conversation about how to get shit done? And I don't know about him, if he would or if he wouldn't, but that really is. Again, I use the word first time of the day, solutionaries. We need
solutionaries. I was thinking about that on the way here. I like that.
Yeah, because like we've always talked about, you and I, we certainly are on opposite sides of the political spectrum, but if it came down to solving problems, does it really matter? Should it really matter? Of course, the answer is no. You and I, over the years, have found ourselves solving many problems, and the origins of your politics never come into it, right? It's how do we get from here, from A to B right now? What's in front of us? What tools do we have? What do we have to overcome? And how do we get to the other side? And, that's, I think, what's lost in these fucking politicians.
I look at the thing, I know that maybe for you, your worst nightmares about the Biden administration are coming true, but here's how you negotiate, right? You start farther to one end of the negotiation than you expect to end up. So I think with most of these things, with most of these ideas and programs and the heavy lift legislative stuff that the Biden administration has and the Democrats have put out there in the last 2 months, there's some of it, is extreme. The amount of money, the scope of the projects, because I think Biden truly was hoping to negotiate some of these things and have the eventual end product be considered bipartisan. So,
maybe, but I mean, think about that. I think negotiating in general, I think there's a strategy there in business. It works if you're trying to buy a car, or it used to, even buying a house in certain markets. But when you do it in politics, even if Biden intended, say we've talked a lot about the corporate tax rate, right? Mm-hmm. And there's a ton of reports suggesting that Biden is willing to compromise somewhere in the middle and have it settle 25% or whatever. So if the intention was to start high and ultimately settle there, I don't know. I don't know if that was his goal or not. But when you do that in politics, I think it can be dangerous, because then once you grab power, you'll never let it go. And we saw that all through COVID. There was other reports this weekend. I'm going to go all over the place here, but with fucking Fauci saying, "Hey,
we'll let you go to the end." So.
These masks, they could be with us forever to use as a tool for seasonal illnesses and flus. And the question is, okay, people are getting vaccinated. When can we take the masks off? And he's basically saying, well, why would we really ever go back to that when we found that they work? And so the point is, you give them an inch and they take a mile. So I think when you're negotiating, if in fact the Biden administration is trying to negotiate policy to the extreme of one side, hoping to make a compromise, I think that can backfire, and it's dangerous to do that in politics.
Well, I mean, is that his mistake, or is that, or does the responsibility for what's happening with this stuff fall at the feet of Mitch McConnell, who
Biden's the president.
In 10 seconds, I can find a thing on my phone, and you can hear him say how his 100% of his focus is stopping the Biden administration.
Yeah, no, I remember you actually told me that.
Yeah,
but
he said the same stupid fucking shit about Obama, right?
Well, listen,
in 2008.
Number one, if the president is the president, so he's responsible or she's responsible. In this case, the co-president is half responsible.
Okay, all right. Listen. My point of bringing that up about the negotiating thing is as follows. Since McConnell has come in and said, hey, 100% of my focus is stopping this, he's abdicated. He's already told the Democrats, hey, you don't have to do anything that resembles negotiating with us because we're not negotiating. So, Democrats have the option to run some things through on reconciliation. That's not their first choice. It hasn't been their first choice. I think that's been obvious, but that doesn't, so if you say, hey, we're not going to negotiate with you on solutions for these problems, then you leave them to there's no reason for them to come back to the center, right? So, I mean, the numbers are already out there on these programs, the $4 trillion worth of heavy lift legislative programs that he's put out there. Those numbers were already out there before the turtle came out and said, hey, we're not going to negotiate with you. We're not going to engage. McConnell. Doesn't he look like a turtle?
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah.
Like with that
his face.
Gullet on his neck, whatever that is.
So I think that once again, the Republican leadership in the Senate has abdicated their responsibility to negotiate with the other side. This is a two-party system, whether you like it or not, Trav. Until that's changed, that's how it works. And if you're coming out repeatedly, and now multiple Democratic administrations, and you're the leader of the other side, and your sole statement every time is, we're not negotiating with you, I think all of the fault lies at his feet for this, right? All of the obstructionism during the Obama administration falls at Mitch McConnell's feet. And the current lack of participation by Republicans in trying to solve some very serious once-in-a-generation type problems that we're facing is it is despicable, really. And I mean, it's hard for me because I already think that the group, you take this group, right? Ted Cruz, Mitch McConnell, the speaker in the House of Representatives, Kevin McCarthy, I'm forgetting some of the names, It's just, these are Jim Gordon, these are the worst, right? And you're seeing them try to censure and erase and cancel the remaining voices of reason in the Republican Party. Mitt Romney, Liz Cheney.
What are they doing to Mitt Romney?
Well, he barely. So they had a Republican. What was it? Was it a convention? It was a Utah State Republican. Was the Republican Utah State Convention, right? The Republican Party in Utah. That's Mitch Romney's home state, right?
Yeah.
He's the head Mormon, right? So he appeared there. They wanted to censure him for voting to convict Trump during the.
Did people come to his rally?
Whose rally?
To Romney's rally.
He didn't have a rally.
Oh, what did he have?
He was a speaker. Well, they had the Utah convention, Republican convention. There was a move to censure him, right? He barely escaped censure. He has, for a very long time, been the most powerful Utah Republican.
More than just Utah. I mean, the guy was a presidential candidate,
right?
At one
but
point.
it all stemmed. I mean, he's the head guy, right? I mean, he's the big cheese Mormon. So anyway, they vote. So he narrowly missed being censured in that Republican convention, and then he was booed off the stage, literally booed off the stage by this incredibly vulgar Trump wing of this party that's just disintegrating before our very eyes. I mean, they are not engaged in legislation. They have no legislative vision.
Then why does Romney stay? Why does he stay attached to
we'll see.
this version of the Republican Party?
We'll see if
why doesn't he
do.
go independent?
We'll see if they do, right?
Here's an interesting kind of way to look at this. High-profile guys like a Bernie Sanders, he's technically an independent, right? But he aligns mostly with the Democrats, and he was leading the charge with the real crazies, the progressives.
That only happened during the Hillary Clinton, primary run. That she, let me get this straight now. Who'd she lose that to?
Obama. You talking way back in 2008?
No, Hillary. He ran against Hillary when she was going against Trump.
They both ran twice, right? Didn't they both run in 2008 against Obama? She didn't in 12.
She didn't run. Yeah, in 2008. Well, I don't think he did. She did.
What you're experiencing now, is this Alzheimer's or is it dementia?
See, so much of my
senior moment.
So much of my communication is facial expression. You're losing it in this podcast, but so I don't believe that Bernie Sanders ran in 2008. Certainly, Hillary did, and it was a close race between Hillary and Obama. And then finally, his popularity surged, and she lost that. Then she ran again, and this was the year that, and again, it's Trump. Right? They didn't run. I don't think either of them ran against Obama in his second term.
But here's my question. I'm using Bernie as an example of someone who has had some success maintaining his position as an independent and still navigating through Washington and getting things done. Is there an example on the right that you can think of somebody who is a registered independent and has, I don't want to say, jump between the aisle on both sides, but doesn't really. Necessarily. There isn't one, right? I can't think of one.
Well, there may be, but I'm not particularly familiar with it, and that could have as much to do with the fact that I wouldn't be overly interested in a Republican / independent combination.
Why not?
Well, because because
are you so dogmatic, my friend?
No, it's just not Republican, right? I mean, the traditional Republican things like smaller government and financial conservatism are not the important topics to me, especially when the more traditional Republicans just really were not socially liberal, right? They're always so. The past Republican Party, the one that I'm sure you identify more with than the current one, had these true conservative, long-time conservative tenets, right? Smaller government, lower taxes, less entitlements.
No victim mentality. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Get shit done.
There's nothing. Okay, let me just make a statement.
And let me also just say for anybody tuning in, I have never been registered as a Republican. Yeah. Would you know that in my youth, like many foolish youths, I was a registered Democrat and then eventually switched to an independent where I stand today.
Oh, at least you weren't a communist.
Exactly.
Like
some in the...
Like some we know.
Yeah.
So these long-time Republican tenants, I mean, there's none of that's left. I mean, the only thing the current Republican Party, the Donald Trump Republican Party, which is all that's left now, as we watch Liz Cheney and.
But remember, I've always maintained that he really wasn't a true Republican. I think Trump. I think the Republican Party that you and we see today is really only. I mean, there was obviously the core of it was there, but it really kind of grew into its own only in the last 5 years. I think, with Trump as its leader.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. I mean, Trump has destroyed the Republican Party as we know it. The only thing they have left, this is what I've been trying to say, the only thing that they are now is a party of grievances. That's all. They have no platform. They have no forward-looking projects. It's just grievance. That's all it is. That's all Trump ever was. That's all he did from day one till the end of his presidency was state his grievances about, just name it, whether it's the media, the Democrats, the other rich people that won't accept him because he's fucking dick. He's also the guy in class that makes a joke and nobody laughs, and then he starts to hate them. Right? He's the Columbine kid that never came back. So that's what I'm trying to say. This version of the Republican Party has no agenda, no platform. They're aimless. It's just grievance. It's just not Democrat. Right.
Well, can't the same be said for the Democrats in the sense that all they want to do
Can I just answer that? No. Yeah, absolutely not.
But it kind of is because, what they're saying, Biden's motto, like I made fun of last week, Build Back Better. I don't even know what that means, but what he's saying is we can't do what Trump's motto was, which was Make America Great Again. And so the messaging there is, as you always say, Make America White Again. But the messaging there is at some point in the past, it was better than it is now, right? And we need to get back to that. And Biden is saying, no, we're not going back to that. We're going to do something even bigger and better. So we're totally transforming what America is today. So what you started to say about a guy like Romney, if he was a breakout of the Republican Party, but none of the core Republican Party principles resonate with you. So here's a question for you. What do you think is or are the biggest issues facing us today? Like what's the single biggest one or two problems that we have to solve?
I think that the inequities that exist in our society that were so accelerated and magnified by the COVID-19 situation. And when I say that, I don't mean by the disease. I mean by the things that happened, the shutdowns, the loss of jobs, and who had to go out and continue to provide essential services. Who suffered the most? What groups of people suffered the most ill health effects? What groups lost the most jobs? Which ones won't come back the way, these are the things that we're going to have to, and then some of that and then attached to that, not a separate issue, is the systemic racism that the whole last year, all of 2020 revealed. And look, I already knew it was there, but so many people just still don't get it that these things, when you say, hey, there's systemic racism in the United States, that in no way means that I'm saying this is a racist country. It's not part of our makeup. It's not part of our goals.
Which Biden came out and clarified that same thing.
But it exists, right? And so the people that don't want to deal with it continue to say, nah, you're wrong. This is not a racist country. There's nothing for us to do. But everything they say, every part of his campaign was full of racist dog whistles and nonsense, starting with that stupid slogan.
Well, I liked the way, I don't necessarily agree with all of that, but I liked the way you said it some time ago, which was, God, you said something to the effect of not every Trump supporter is a racist, but not every, what did you say? Not every Trump supporter is a racist, but every racist is a Trump supporter.
Yes.
Is that how you said it?
I think so.
Something like that.
I think so. I think that would probably bear out. Certainly not every Trump supporter is some kind of racist, right? I'm sure there are a lot of people that identify with the message that they think he's putting out there, which is, hey, you've been forgotten by the elites of the Democratic Party and so forth, blah, blah, blah. They don't care about the factory jobs that you've lost, right? But I haven't forgot about you, right? And so there's a lot of people that are going to respond to that. I mean, if you're in the Midwest someplace and your factory town is a mere shadow of its former self, you live that every day. But listen, you have to be better than that. You have to think further than the surface shininess of his stupid campaigns that he's playing you, right? Listen, I'm speaking to all the Trump supporters out there right now that are listening. I know there's at least tens of you. Okay? He hasn't done jack shit for you, right? No jobs came back. Nothing's happened. He hasn't fixed anything for you guys. Coal is not the future.
Don't you think? Yeah, I agree with that. Don't you think though that it's interesting that you chose those two as the big issues of our time? And so the reason I asked you that is because what I was thinking about my comments about a guy like Romney or anybody else. Let's say there was a break-off individual who showed some leadership and who was looking at being a solutionary and solving problems. Yeah. I think that the core issues change with the times, right? So those two things that you just gave, let's just say didn't exist last year or 2 years ago. Wasn't the big issue that people were working on solving, right? Mm-hmm. And because of events, that's what made those into the forefront. And that's how I think politics should be. Is it's not always, the standard Democratic talking points, Republican talking points. These are the core things we have to solve. Shit changes, and what's in front of you now or what's in front of you for the next 10 years, those are the problems that you have to solve.
I think maybe you want to make a distinction. Is the shit changing, or is the focus being changed on purpose? Is it being manipulated in a way that's not good for the country? I think that my personal opinion would be that and I don't want to give Trump all the credit for this. He certainly is the master media manipulator as far as that goes. But Trump, his subterfuge to try to draw in disaffected groups of Americans has been picked up on by the worst. The Stephen Millers, the Steve Bannons, the Kevin McCarthy's, the Jim Gordons, the Mitch McConnell. These are the worst of the people in the United States, and they have what's the word? They have hijacked the Trump message for their own white supremacy type messages, right? So even though I fully agree with you that not every Trump supporter is a racist, but every racist is a Trump supporter because Trump's movement, his administration, his whatever it is now that he doesn't have an administration, is the only societal element that's ever accepted them, and he accepted them wholeheartedly.
That's what I was just going to say. Is that it almost seems like it's a numbers game. Just get as many bodies as I can get because we'll take all the outcasts. Anybody who needs a home, you didn't previously find a place that you fit in, we'll take you on our side.
Yeah, but there's nothing about that. That sounds on the surface of it like it has some moral value or like that's somehow a good thing. Not necessarily a good thing, right? Nothing that draws a growing number of white supremacists in this country to your bosom is a good thing. And nothing about a movement that does that is good for the country.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. And that's an interesting twist. And I'm just thinking out loud here because, again, the 2 points that you gave, clearly we have racism to deal with in this country. But do you think it's gotten worse in the sense that there has been a growing white supremacy movement, or they came out of the shadows? What's your sense? You're older than me. You've lived through more shit than me.
They're always there. They've always been there. They don't always have to be there, but they're there. And as long as they are there, we need to keep our thumb on it, right? You want to put your knee on the neck of a black man until he's dead. The opposite of that is us keeping our knee on the neck of white supremacy until it's dead or at least subdued to the point where it's ineffectual, right? But when you let social media platforms that command the attention, where you can talk to 35 million people in a moment, all at the same time, over and over again, when you let that run wild and you let people make racist statements on those platforms and you do nothing about it, that tells the groups that, hey, our time is here. Trump is here. Our time is here. Not that Trump's the head of the white supremacy movement. He's too stupid to do that, right? He's the head of the Trump movement. I mean, he doesn't give a shit about anybody or anything but himself. Nothing he's done in the last 5 or 6 years is anything more than a method to pump money into his failing businesses.
That's what I think, which is why I always refute the fact when people say, he's a racist, this and that. I don't think he thinks that way. I think, like you said, he just wants to pump money into his organizations.
He does, but he has no compunction, no issue with using racism to accomplish that. He doesn't care. Guys, let's not make a mistake and think that the fact that Trump might not be the head of the
KKK.
local KKK or whatever they're calling themselves today, he has no problem letting his movement, his followers use his vehicle, his political juggernaut that we've witnessed over the last 5-6 years to their advantage, to promote their causes. He doesn't care as long as along the way it somehow pours money into his coffers, right? Being the president allowed him to grift and scam the American public for, I'm going to say, maybe even billions of dollars, but certainly multi-millions of dollars over the 4 years he was president. It'll be years before we know. When we do know, I think all of you will be disgusted when you hear the amount of money that this piece of shit pumped into his personal bank account by being the president. I know, Travis, you don't think that the laws that govern that really are important, but I think in the long run, people won't like it, right? When it's going to come out, it'll take
maybe.
time.
I mean, maybe it'll come out, maybe it won't. I mean, some of this stuff is out, right? I mean, one of the things that you were kind of hoping for was a report that he had some looming debt schedule that was coming due and whether or not he'd be able to make that. I think he basically refinanced that already. So he's got other people willing to give him money to pay off his other debts.
Right, but let's talk about excuse me. Let's talk about how he accomplished that, because it's pretty obvious. By promoting the big lie throughout the end of his failing campaign, and by using that to generate donations to fight the big lie, air quotes there, right? He collected millions and millions of dollars in campaign contributions.
Where did the money go?
Which he's going to illegally use to pay down his debts.
And that's fine. If he illegally uses the money, then he should be punished. Now, what is not illegal is paying off strippers, as we've established.
Well, of course it is, but it's the same thing. And you've said so many times in the past that, if he committed campaign contribution violations of the law, that's not a big deal. Well,
that's not what I said. What I said was, as you described it, to me, shouldn't be illegal. And I think you even cited some statute or law that made it illegal. And I said, hey, doesn't mean I agree with it. And the example that we gave was the lawyer getting money from his house to pay off the stripper out of the campaign fund. And I don't think that is illegal. Maybe it is, but if it is, that's just stupid.
So Michael Cohen took, in order to hide Trump's violation of campaign contribution laws, Michael Cohen refinanced his house to give Stormy Daniels $250,000 in hush money. That had she not done that, then all of details would have become public, which they did anyway.
Yeah.
But the idea there was, hey, we don't want them to become public, so you pay her, I'll pay you back out of campaign contributions. All the way around, double-sided illegal scam.
Only because it came through the campaign account, correct?
Well, even if Trump just took $250,000 of his own money and paid her, that's illegal.
Which it shouldn't be. If that is an agreement between two people, I'm going to give you this money to be quiet.
If one of them's not, you're absolutely right, Travis. If one of them's not involved in running a campaign to become the president of the United States, that's absolutely illegal.
Didn't that happen before?
Many times before. That was
no, before. But the payoff was during. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it doesn't matter when it happened. That's not relevant.
He was a private citizen before, I guess is my point. But the payoff happened during the time he was in campaigning.
I was going to go real dirty. I'm trying to think. I'm starting to realize how many people might be listening at this stage of the game. Let me just say that it doesn't matter what piece of news you're trying to suppress. if you do it during a campaign, that's illegal. You give money to somebody else and acquire something of value towards your campaign. That's illegal.
Yeah, I again, the point I made was this was an agreement between two people, and I think I'm struggling for the word, but
let me help you because I'm good at that.
Yeah. Their time together, let's say, that all happened when he was basically a private citizen. But the payoff happened when he was campaigning. Is that what you're saying?
I do believe that's the case, but I don't think that the time of the occurrence is particularly relevant to the law that's being broken here.
Well, I mean,
and let's remember, in Michael Cohen's conviction, Donald Trump is the unindicted co-conspirator named by the Justice Department in that legal action. That may yet come back to haunt him. Okay.
And that would be a federal crime, this isn't anything to do with New York, or is it out of the state of New York?
I think these are federal election law violations, campaign contribution. It's federal law, I believe.
So do you think that is the thing that must happen, that somehow Trump goes down? Because this is what I wanted to ask you when you identified kind of the two biggest issues that you see facing this country. Do you think that Trump has to go down in some capacity for any progress to be made?
I think that what we're seeing is so here's the thing, right? The Republican Party, the social media giants, right, that we've talked about that have been allowed, that were allowed to run completely unfettered during his entire administration. And so there I'm talking about Twitter and Facebook, the main vehicles that Trump used to promote his campaign and so forth. Those people, they all want to be held completely. Nobody's responsible for any of that.
They shouldn't be.
Well, here's the thing. That's a different question, but what you're seeing now, what's happening in the Republican Party now is the consequence, is the aftermath of that thinking. And so now you've seen the corruption and disruption of the other viable party in a two-party system. That's bad for democracy. Okay?
But isn't it good if the Republican Party self-implodes because they have all these... I mean, isn't that what's supposed to happen?
Nothing good about it.
Well, yeah, but you've always said, because you are a fan of the two-party system, whether or not it's the Republicans by name or something else, for no other reason than to have a check against the other party, in this case the Democrats. But what I'm saying is, as in one of our episodes, the Republican Party is dead.
Or freedom, death.
No, three freedoms.
Freedom,
and that's
death.
the way it should be. 3 freedoms and then the death. Because and there was a couple of catchphrases that you said in there I wanted to get to, but I guess what I'm saying is I don't disagree with a lot of what you're saying about what's happening with the Republican Party.
You're trying to push back against some of the more platitude type points of that, but sometimes, Travis, something isn't wrong just because it's a platitude.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that. I always look at it through the lens of how to solve the problem, and it's just kind of the way my brain works. I look at things like how to solve puzzles, and I'm not a puzzle type of person, but whatever the challenge is, how do I get in front of this hurdle? How do I get on the other side? How do I get better at this? And so what I'm just saying is, I don't disagree with a lot of the bullshit and the problems in Washington and the Republican Party, and all those names that you mentioned on the leadership side of the Republican Party.
How do I even know those people? Right? I should not know their names. That's
but maybe that's a good
indicator.
thing. A good thing, right? If they're losing their star power.
Not good for me.
But here's the point. What I would rather see, this is kind of a reference to capitalism, right? What I always say about capitalism is the way that the free market is supposed to work is if you have something of value, whether you are the capital or whether you are the labor, your value will dictate your worth. And that's the way it's supposed to be. And that's why I'm against government intervention. That's why I'm against government setting wages. The free market is supposed to work that way. And I think similarly with politics. If the Republican Party, or any party for that matter, is doing some batshit crazy stuff and they self-implode because the people, the masses, are just saying, hey, this is wrong, this is enough, we're going in a different direction, you no longer represent the will of the people. And let's not forget that. That's the way this government is supposed to be, a representative government. if that's what's happening and that party implodes and something else grows out of it that is in the form of the will of the people, to me, that is the way it's supposed to work.
I'm okay with that. It's just that here's the danger, right? A couple of things I want to say about that. I think let's talk capitalism for a second, right? I completely agree. As we established recently, I actually am a capitalist. Okay, so whenever possible, I think we should let capitalism determine the winners and losers, right, in the society, especially when it comes to business. Okay. So and I'm going to credit Pete Buttigieg, my actual choice for president this time around, but he's the secretary of
now he's building bridges.
Yeah, building bridges. He's the secretary of transportation, right? Which encompasses a lot of things, right? DOT,
which is so weird because he's anti-transportation. I'm just kidding.
So I heard him put this the other day, and I thought it really kind of summed up how this needs to work. Whenever possible, you want to let capitalism let things roll out the way they're going to. Let capitalism determine who's the winner and the loser, right? Let things that are good rise to the surface on their own merit and value. One of the things sometimes why you need government intervention is that there may not be enough time for that to happen. And
what do you mean?
Well, I'm just that for instance, let's talk about electric cars, right? And how long until electric cars or some other hydrogen or whatever alternative fuel cars replace gasoline combustion cars. And yeah, that's going to happen because even I'm starting to think about, I wouldn't mind having an electric car because gas is in California, it's over $4.
And then this fucking pipeline.
Yeah, this pipeline thing. I mean,
gets hacked.
Yeah.
And now gas is going to be up again.
Who do you think did that? Right?
What are they saying? The Russians?
Of course it was. Or the North Koreans or China or all three of them. You know, I don't know. Maybe they're in a book.
Do the North Koreans even have internet?
They do, actually. You know, when you take all the resources of a nation state and you put it behind your tech hacking community instead of feeding the people, it turns out to be quite a bit of money. Now, can they do all that and feed the people and have a healthy government? No, they can't. But they don't give a shit. They will starve the people and put the money into hacking, you know, so that they can do things like this. I haven't heard who they think is responsible for this, but I guarantee you it's not going to be Chevron Oil.
Yeah.
Do it, right? So, okay. So, hey, you know, we need to get internal combustion cars off the roads sooner than the normal processes of capitalism would guarantee it. So it's going to take some government intervention. I don't expect you to agree with that. I'm just saying that's why these things happen. And that's why sometimes it doesn't make you an anti-capitalist to say, hey, if everything was equal and we had the time, we'd let market forces fix this problem for us, because they would. But if that problem doesn't get fixed till 2060, we're dead. We're all dead.
I think there's a debate on how much time we have, right? And my opinion on that is that with climate issues, it has to be a global. You doing good in there? You switching from coffee?
No, I like to interchange. That water tastes so good after all of that coffee. Go ahead.
After your rant.
Yeah.
No, I mean, the bottom line is this. Government intervention, what is the proper intervention? And here's the wrong intervention. Like I've cited before, when you have states like California who just decide they're going to put a date on the calendar that says no more gas vehicles are allowed to be sold into the state. What did we say? 2030, something like that, 2035. Mm-hmm. That does nothing to spark innovation. And so I understand what you're saying. You can't just say, well, we'll get there eventually and maybe it'll be 50 years from now. But we don't have the technology. So it's the wrong solution. This is an example of how government thinks that just by saying the words, that's not a solution. That's you making an edict that does nothing. And so I know, for example, the coronavirus response, it was essentially the global community said we've got to tackle COVID like the U.S. did World War II. Everybody making tanks and planes, right? So everybody around the world make vaccines, convert factories to make masks, right? It was this global effort. It almost needs to be something with the same type of severity with electric vehicles and climate change on that level for there to be any type of progress. You can't just say at this date we're not going to have any gas-powered vehicles. There has to be complete conversion of the economies globally, not just here in the U.S. So I'm talking, factories. I'm talking, governments. I'm talking the Russians. I'm talking the Indians. I'm talking everybody.
But, not a big fan of government, of California government in general. I think we've established that. But I will tell you this, when it comes to cars, as California goes, so goes the world. So when California
but it doesn't.
It does, though, because this is the largest car market on the planet. Okay.
Yeah, but you can't compare a market, say, in California with other continents.
Nobody's going to make two kinds of cars. Major car manufacturers are not going to make cars that can be sold in California but can't be sold in China. They're not going to do that. All the cars will be made to California standards eventually. And by California setting those standards, that's how we've gone from 7 miles a gallon to 12 on
But that doesn't
average.
do anything for India or China. It doesn't make them.
It does because eventually the people that don't die in India
from
COVID are going to want cars. I mean, all these countries their middle classes are going to rise with the tide, and they're going to want cars. And when they want cars, they're going to want cool cars. And in U.S. automakers and Japanese automakers, whoever's making good cars is going to make cars that they can sell a lot of. And if you can't sell your car in California, you're not likely to be successful.
You are. You can sell it in Texas. I did the same thing. I had a California illegal, my jet truck, as you always refer to.
Not an individual vehicle that doesn't conform to the smog regulations.
But you always reference the jet truck. You know why it sounded like that?
You had a turbine or something in it, right?
Well, it had a turbo. It was a turbo diesel.
Right.
And after 2010, I think is the date, all diesels in California had to be a certain carb compliance, and there was a particulate filter that was installed to basically catch the exhaust and then recirculate it through the motor and then burn it off. Mm-hmm. But that's actually, it's bad. It's good for the air, I guess, but it's bad for the truck. It's bad for
catalytic conversion.
Kind of, yeah, right. So I took it off and, had some secret, Chinese computer chip to make it run. And registered it out of state, and then when I went to sell it, I sold it in Texas, and I didn't have to convert it back.
That's the same computer chip that took down the pipeline.
It is, right?
Whole southeast of the country. All right, so I want to go back just a little bit and try to get kind of down the rabbit hole on government. So I think suffice it to say that you and I probably don't we probably don't agree on when government interference or government participation is called for. So, okay, that's fine. But let's talk about what's going to be what's going on with the Republican Party. Why is it bad? Why am I not happy that the Republican Party seems to be disintegrating? A lot of bad things can happen in that process, right? You have
some will go to the Democrats. We can't have them any stronger.
Well, I mean, you may have some things that you consider are bad, but I'm going to stick to the ones that I think are bad. While this party becomes so powerful, while this faction of this party becomes while the authoritarian faction of this party becomes so powerful, you see things like what's happening with Liz Cheney and Romney in that party. You see how these people are being canceled, right? Which is their biggest gripe, and they're just, while they're griping about it, they're doing it. So much for the whole cancel culture nonsense. It's not a thing. It's not a real thing. It's just a political gimmick that they're using currently, and they discard it whenever they want. I mean, this is
you say cancel culture is not real?
It's not a real thing.
It is real.
It's not. It's just it really is a Republican Party construct that they use when it benefits them and then discard when they don't think. So real things are not discardable that way, right? So real things that are true, you can't just discard at a whim for your own personal benefit. And those are the things we have to watch out for. So, so what's going to happen with this Republican Party? They are going to drag up the dregs. They're going to, all the anarchists, all the white supremacy groups, all of this stuff, all the National Socialists. That's Nazis, okay? All the names that they come up with, right? And did you see in Texas over the weekend the fact that the little dweeb from the Republican Party that was putting forth their election reform included in that language something called purity of the election process?
Mm-mm.
Yeah, I mean, this is language from when Texas had all white primaries, meaning that, hey,
what's the reference to though? What's the purity?
Well, the
part?
reference is from their state constitution and the election laws that contained therein from way back during Jim Crow. And so this new bill that's going through the Texas legislature, two different bills under the same name, one going through the House, one going through the Senate. And they have the same name, and part of that is on purpose to make it confusing. And then the idea is they both get passed, and then they go into conference, right, where they try to work out the differences between them. But the point is that, people say, hey, these laws are not about voter suppression. Of course they are.
Well, what do they do?
Well, this one references the purity of the election.
What does that mean?
Well, that means that only white people vote in the election.
So this bill, are you saying that Texas is writing a bill that says only white people can vote?
Texas is writing they're so ignorant that they're writing a bill that has the same language in it that allowed that state to prohibit people of color from voting during Jim Crow.
But that's not what the bill says now.
Well, is it?
I don't know. Have you read it?
Well, come on. Here's the thing. When you use white supremacist language in current laws, what does that mean? That you're just stupid, or
could be, right? I mean, that's a dumb move, right? If what you're saying is, hey, I'm going to put out a bill, and by the way, Texas is, let's say it's
easy enough,
49.9% blue. It's about to be full blue, right, on the political scale. And so why would you write a bill that says the purity and what is it called?
Well, I mean, it contains the phrase election purity.
So here's my guess, and I tried to bait you, but you didn't answer my question.
Okay.
I'm guessing it doesn't say only white people can vote.
It never did.
Okay, but you said way back in the Jim Crow days.
Well, it is the same language that was used in previous Texas voting legislation that did eventually result in prohibiting anybody that wasn't white. They just called it, that is the language that enabled the thing that became known as white primaries. They weren't the only state to do it, but they were, and it never said that only white people could vote.
Yeah, and I'm not going to defend this bill. I haven't read it. This is the first I'm hearing of it.
I'm just saying this is the way. This is the way that the disintegration of the Republican Party. This is the way it is surfacing in the society.
But, so let's assume this bill doesn't pass. That's the way that it's supposed to be. It's
gonna pass though.
Well,
it's already passed.
I mean, again, then we'll see what actually happens, right? And I don't know what's in this bill. I mean, I'm guessing it has to do with what, voter ID, something like that.
Yep.
But there are things that we need to fix in the election process, and that's my opinion. This whole fucking show is my opinion and your opinion. So I can speak with those liberties. Mm-hmm. In my opinion,
what problem is it you're trying to fix with voter laws?
Well, that is my point, and you brought this up after this election. You said the whole lie about the election being stolen was predicated on the fact that we had a broken system and it needed to be fixed and it was stolen. And maybe there's some truth to the fact that it wasn't necessarily that broken. There's some things that I would like to see fixed because it just doesn't make sense. The big one that I've always cited on this podcast is that I think the voting should be the same in every state. I don't think it should be different in state to state. That's the vast majority of our problems is this state counts this time, this state counts over here, this one counts mail, this one doesn't. Some of it is vote by mail, some of it's not. And then you get into the weeds about early voting and number of polling stations and all that stuff. But the big issue is let's just make it the same, and then it would solve a lot of these problems. That's what I think.
Well, I mean, I think the biggest con on that proposal there, and maybe this isn't what you're talking about, but the biggest thing that makes it hard for foreign powers to interfere in U.S. elections is the fact that there's no centralized voting situation. So there's no way that they can game the system and affect the national election, right? Maybe in a given, locale, something could be gamed, but then it's not done the same across the country. So there's no way that is going to affect the country. So I think if you check on this, you'll find it's widely considered one of the strongest things about our election process is that there is no centralized, everything's all the same, everybody does it the same way. At the same time, that's no excuse for letting states create laws that result in voter suppression.
Yes, continue.
Well, I mean, listen, we just need to come together as a country and understand this. It's better when more people vote.
That I agree with.
Right?
Yeah, it's better when more people vote. But again, when you're talking about a national
we just
election,
had the most successful election of all time. Record numbers of people voting.
It was so close to being 100% successful. But we elected a Democrat, so what can I say?
Well, I get that from your viewpoint. That might not be a success. But when you have record numbers of people voting and virtually no fraud at all that anybody has been able to prove, that's a success. Why then would you change the laws?
Right, and that is the biggest issue. It's a knee-jerk reaction from the Republican Party that didn't like the outcome. They saw that the only opportunity or their best opportunity to get back in power is to change laws that favor their party. I totally get that.
So what should the natural process be that stops this from happening? What should be happening within the Republican Party as they look at their state wings and they see
better solutions? That's what they should be doing.
Well, okay, so
God damn it, give me more coffee.
What's not happening that should be happening in regards to this issue so that we don't have to create a national voting act? I'm good. So what's not happening is because of this disintegration of the Republican Party at the national level, there's no leverage for the National Republican Party to rein in the worst impulses of their state government counterparts. And so these states that have historically passed voter suppressive election laws that were Jim Crow states. I mean, let's look at who we're talking about here. Texas, Florida, Georgia, right? All of these states were their natural inclination to try to stop people of color from voting because that's their history and that's their culture. That was all being controlled by the Voters' Rights Act. That was overturned during the Trump administration because this faction, this white supremacist faction, this part of the party that doesn't give a shit about the overall consequences of the stupid stands they take on things is letting it happen. So, if there was fraud, Travis, I'd be right with you. Hey, let's make laws that stop the fraud. There's no fraud. There's no laws needed. And so when I asked the question, the rhetorical question, why is this happening? Why are these states and others that we're just not talking about yet engaged in these state-level voter suppression election laws, right? It's because they have nobody to stop them.
Well, that's the I would say that's not the primary motivation. I maintain that the primary motivation is for power. They're trying to manipulate the vote in any way they can that favors their party.
Right.
And they're able to do it because they don't have a check on the power side. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, because the actual Republican Party has disintegrated into this cudgel of Trumpsters that are being highly controlled by things like QAnon, which is just another cover for white supremacy, right?
But how does this work mechanically? If I understand you correctly, you're saying that the Republican Party lacks strong leadership at the top, so that somebody should be monitoring what's happening in these states that you mentioned and say, what, you can't do this? You can't put these votes through?
Listen.
How does that even work mechanically?
McConnell and Kevin McCarthy and other such leaders of the Republican Party, the ex-president, all right, should be coming out and saying, hey, Georgia, what you're doing is just racist nonsense. Stop it.
But there's no teeth to that, right?
No, but it's what would work.
You think?
Yeah, this is – so there's a name for it. Okay. So we've talked about this a few times, and it is one of the biggest problems in today's politics, and I do think that this causes some of the things that you struggle with the most, Travis. And, yeah, there's no teeth to it. I mean, because we need, for a democratic government to work, right, you need people to not always go to one extreme or the other. Oh, hey, I am going to do this because there's no law that says I can't. Okay, I'm going to commit campaign contribution violations because nobody ever really prosecutes that. In the past, you know what stopped political campaigns from engaging in illegal campaign contribution activities? The fact that it was illegal, not that they were going to get prosecuted. Do you know why having the president of the United States not engage in wholesale psychopathic lying was not something we've ever seen before? Because nobody believed that would be accepted. Okay, but it is being accepted because Trump has changed the equation negatively, badly.
Isn't the way this is supposed to work is that, let's say these voter suppression laws, which we'll leave that alone.
Okay.
But let's say these voter suppression laws in these
call them by name you like. I don't care.
Well, here's the
voting security laws. Does that make you feel better?
The reason why I kind
rail against that?
Yeah, it's because I don't disagree with you.
Yeah.
I'm not saying the system is necessarily that broken that the knee-jerk reaction is warranted. To me, this is a complete reaction to a race the Republicans saw they were losing before the day of the election and after. That's how I view it. So do we need to reinvent the wheel because of what happened in the 2020 election? No, I don't think so. But it does provide some insight into looking at how voting is done in the state. You and I, through just doing the podcast, we read a lot of news articles and learned some things about the way voting is done in this country in various states that I know I didn't know before really looking into it, because why would I? Mm-hmm. And why would you research anything, east of California? Because you don't want to go east of California.
Very true.
So I guess the point is, I really do look at it as more of a strategy. I see the losing side trying to change the rules so that it favors them or gives them an opportunity to somehow win and compete. Because I think they're losing favor. I think the Republican Party's message does not resonate with the vast majority of American people. That's how I see what's happening in this country. But I do believe there are things in...
What does that mean, though, to you? I mean, is that okay?
Is it okay that the Republicans are losing favor?
Well, is it okay that they're trying to change the rules because they're losing favor because of their shitty views on things?
No, and that's what I'm saying. You've cited a number. I don't have a couple hundred voter suppression laws in various states around the country. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of detail there. Mm-hmm. Some of the things that we're reading about, and I'll give you one. I mentioned this even before the election. I think you and I talked about mail-in voting and making sure that you have the right person. It just makes complete 100% common sense that you should be able to know who's voting. And so however you do that, is it a blood sample? Is it a DNA? Is it an ID? I don't know how you do it, but I refute the idea that somehow identifying who your votes are coming from is wrong and racist. It's just not.
Okay, all right. Let's just back that up just a little. So here's the reason why there's no voter fraud. Not because it couldn't be done, but because the risk, no way, is anywhere close to the benefit, okay? So There is no way to commit massive voter fraud that would not be detected. So right off the bat, you're limited. And I think if this election cycle has shown us anything, there's no way to try to tell people that massive voter fraud has been committed, because you can't come up with any example of any voter fraud anywhere.
Okay, go ahead.
Right? So what are you left with then? So for anybody that wants to commit voter fraud, and I'm not disputing the fact, I get it. You think there are people that would want to commit voter fraud. Maybe from your perspective, those would be Democrats that want to commit voter fraud. From my perspective, I think it would much more likely be Republicans. And in fact, the only recent voter fraud that's been actually exposed was Republican-based. But let's just assume the Democrats got away from it. That doesn't prove anything. Here's the reason why it doesn't happen. You would need to break dozens of federal laws just to fake one vote. So to go and find somebody that's on a voter roll that's dead and hasn't been removed from that roll, and then get a ballot sent to you, you would have to violate so many federal laws that and let's say you just got caught on one of them, right? So you're gonna take that chance, multiple 20 years, 40 years in prison, so you could fake one vote. You have to have personal information. You have to have everything. I mean, if you were going to go to the trouble of getting all that personal information on somebody, you would steal their identity and buy shit in their name. You wouldn't use that to fake one vote. It doesn't make any sense.
So what's the ... there? That because of everything that you just said, it's so unlikely to happen, or certainly couldn't happen on a large scale, that it wouldn't make an impact, and therefore...
Well, here's the thing. Everybody talks about voter fraud. It's not just this last 4-year cycle, right? Trump always intended to use the specter of voter fraud to either explain why he lost the
even
original,
before, I think,
why he lost the original election, and then he decided to use it why he lost his re-election campaign. That's been the plan from the beginning. That right there speaks to the whole idea of being nonsense. But let's say that because we've had this for voter ID has been going on, has been proposed by the former states that were under the control of the Voter Rights Act for quite some time. And it's been a Republican thing for quite some time, because the Republican Party has known for a long time that if you can make it harder for people of color to vote, then less of them are going to vote. And that works out in their favor most of the time.
So you're talking like physical ID?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, and I think,
but here's the thing, right? Still, right? To get a ballot, to get on the roll, to come in, and you are breaking so many laws that already exist, right? We don't need any other laws. We don't need any additional voter regulations. There's no need. Additional laws that involve complex voter ID requirements for the variety of different ways people vote only has one effect. It does not increase voting security, but it does promote people of color not making it to the polls, right? And then the other stuff that we've heard about, right? Somehow you want to make it illegal to have early votings open on Sundays. Why would you do that?
Well, what
could be the reason except to stop black churches from busing their parishioners to the polls? Why? There's no other reason to ban that.
That's one state in particular you're talking about?
Well, I mean, that's a common goal of these voter suppression state laws, right? They want to make sure that, so typically what's happened over the last few years is that there are many periods of early voting that span over weeks, right? So that everybody doesn't have to make it to the poll one day, so that, because some states just don't have the resources to run 150 polling places, right, and staff them with people. There's costs involved. Okay, we all understand that. So what's the idea? Not have enough polling places, or spread it out over a longer period of time?
Well, and here's my whole point to this conversation, is that the current voting system, in my opinion, is antiquated. It just is. And so the whole notion of not enough polling places, Sundays, that shit's irrelevant. Here's what you do.
Go ahead.
You have a fucking Brinks truck. Everybody gets a paper ballot, and you have hundreds of places you can drop off these ballots, like the post office box, and the Brinks truck takes these ballots, collects them every day or twice a day or whatever. You have a 30-day voting period, and you set a deadline. After November the 3rd, everything has to be postmarked by November the 3rd. After that, no more votes are going to be counted. So we open it from whatever, October the 1st through November 3rd, or pick a date, it doesn't matter. Get your shit into the Brinks truck, and then after that, it'll be counted.
Uh-huh.
And then you don't have to worry about how many polling stations there are, standing in line, giving people food and water, whatever. None of that shit really is relevant. Just put it in the goddamn box and have it counted. What's wrong with that?
That's not what's happening.
I know, but what I'm saying is we're not just you and I, but this
get
whole...
that you're for that, Trev, but that's not...
Well, and
there's no movement for that to happen.
Because they are not, they, as in the royal they, they're not solutionaries.
Let me give you another example of voter suppression tactics used by Republican state governments or county governments, right? So here's what we found over the years, that in majority all-white, upper middle-class neighborhoods, the polling place is the same every year. But in poor neighborhoods where people of color live, they change the fucking polling places every single year. So from year to year, the people of color in that county never know where the fuck the polling place is. But all the white people know where their polling place is. It's been in the same place for 20 years. That's done on purpose, and those are the kind of things that we need to not allow.
So this goes all the way back to the question I asked you some time ago, and you identified two of the biggest problems in this country. And I think you said the racial disparity was number 2, but wherever it is on the list, don't you think that some of the easy ways to fix that particular example is, who cares where the polling place is every 4 years or that it moves around? Don't have a polling place. Who wants to go to somebody's house and go in their stinky garage and get it under a tent and cast a vote?
I hear you.
Just send it in the mail. And you and I have talked here in California. When's the last time you went to a polling place?
Oh, it's been a couple of years now.
And I told you, I didn't even know where it was because I never go. I just mail it in.
Which is why mail by vote with no excuse, no reason is so important. That's the kind of voting law that allows people to not be affected by moving the fucking polling place every time.
So why can't we have a national?
But that's not what's happening, Travis. In these Republican controlled state legislatures, they're eliminating vote by mail. Okay? Not every one of them. There's a different version in every state, but mostly it's like, hey, you can't just say, hey, I want to vote by mail.
Even in California, right? Don't we call it absentee ballots?
Absentee, and that name needs to be changed. I mean, I don't think we call it that here anymore.
We don't? Isn't that implied that you couldn't or you can't?
I think every voter in the state gets a ballot.
I thought so too.
Yeah, which is the right way to do it. Right? If you get a ballot that's not for you and you send that in and you get caught, you're going to prison.
Like if you get the person whose house you bought, they moved out, you got their mail and you use their ballot.
And then with all the scrutiny on election security now, so that you can fake one fucking vote, you're going to risk your liberty for the next 25 years. Nobody's going to do that.
Yeah, I get all that. And again, let me repeat myself, as we've addressed on one of our prior podcasts. Yeah. I do not believe there was election fraud. I'm not in that camp. You asked me in one of our episodes, why do I think Biden won? And I said, because he got more votes than the other guy.
I thought you said voter fraud. I thought you said...
No, I said you shouldn't vote by mail fraud, is what I said.
Well, I think this is a discussion that is extremely valuable, right? I mean, it's a national thing, and it's just one of the many side effects of the disintegration of the Republican Party, because there's no core Republican Party that has any morals or any integrity to watch over. So the party is breaking into factions and behaving, and it's all rogue, right?
There
are no limits.
Yes, and I think, again, I believe, as my comparison to capitalism, that's the way it's supposed to work. I mean, Republicans, historically, conservatives, they have a large religious base. I was reading something in the last couple of weeks that the amount of people who identify as religious is the lowest, in this country anyway, is the lowest it's been, I think, since they've been taking that poll. And, so even 20 years ago, let's say that, I don't have these numbers in front of me, but let's say it was 70% of people identify as having some type of religious faith, and now that number is probably close to 50%, or even in jeopardy of being lower. And I think that's a good thing, especially as we go further out into space, and we're waiting on this report on what the fuck's going on with these aliens and these UFOs. But the point is, when you have these these core principles that people aren't willing to budge on. So let's say historically the Republicans, the conservatives, they're just so dogmatic in their thinking, and it's religious based, and all this voter suppression nonsense. When they're just unwilling to budge and times change, people leave and they don't support them anymore. So I guess my whole view of this thing is, if they collapse because lack of support from the people, then it's working. That's how I see it.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't think I could disagree with anything you just said. I guess my concern is that my overarching concern when we're talking about politics is preserving democracy in America. Okay, that should be the number one concern for everybody, above all else. Now, that doesn't mean that you shred the Constitution to do that, because that's an oxymoron, right? You can't save democracy. Can't be your overriding guiding principle if you're going to just disregard all of the safeguards. So, I mean, I think when I say that, I think that we need to look at, it's kind of like health, right? You're obviously into your health and have been, as you have hit the 40s or something. You've obviously made a few lifestyle changes. It's the same thing for the Republican Party, or for our political system. We need to look at things and make sure that we can have differences of opinion. That's a core principle in our country, right? But we need to look at how we get to that freedom of speech and those differences of opinion, and make sure that it's being done in ways that are healthy for the preservation of democracy. If we lose democracy on the way to keeping our free speech, what's the point? Yeah,
and I think what I am worried about in that is when you have a too heavy hand on the federal level. I mean, this whole kind of conversation has been framed with the notion that we need some type of oversight, some type of, conservative party leadership, or some type of intervention from the federal government. And those kinds of things are what really frighten me when we're talking about preserving democracy, because the two don't go hand in hand. When you have an authoritarian government, there goes democracy. So that's the kind of shit that worries me.
Isn't that so doesn't this, aren't we kind of talking, so there's democracy, right? So there's democracy, and then there's a Republican form of government, right? So if it's not a majority rules government, I mean, it's a republic, right? So when it's a republic, then you have some hierarchy. That's what being a republic means, right? So, and I don't know, maybe that's just the libertarian in you. I understand the desire to keep the republic part of it at a minimum, nothing wrong with that, but that doesn't mean that every policy that stems from trying to run a republic is bad or needs to be discarded.
No, but I maintain that essentially we're just too big. I think we've outgrown the republic. I think we need to revisit that idea, that notion of making things a little smaller.
You want to be able to
break up big tech. Let's break up this big continent.
You know what? You need to be able to come out on the world stage and say, this is something that did come from the Trump years that I've always kind of liked. You need to be able to come out on the world stage as Americans, say, hey, we're America, bitch. And I'm going to leave it at that, I think.
But, it's, I just think.
That's for you, Al.
Biden came under heat from at least the Republicans in the last couple of weeks when he made a comment about the Constitution. I think the Supreme Court is set to hear a landmark Second Amendment case again. and Biden came out saying something to the effect of, no constitutional amendment is absolute. Do you remember seeing that headline quote?
I remember some discussion about that.
And
I agree with that.
He's technically right. Yeah, he's technically right about that. And especially a controversial one like the Second Amendment. But it just begs the question when, and I can see both sides. Here we are 240 years or whatever into this experiment, and if the one tradition that we've held on to is this document that is supposed to be our guiding principle, the Constitution. Yes, I know it's malleable. Yes, I know we've made amendments to the Constitution, some of which were desperately needed, others of which, if we're going to strike down, what's the point? But the issue at hand is if we've outgrown it, which maybe we have, if we've outgrown it because some of those principles don't make sense anymore hundreds of years later, then should we question other things that we might have outgrown? So, and I don't have the answers, but we throw all this into
like what, Mr. Khrushchev?
Well, like this whole united, 50 states, and Democrats want us to be 52 states. And we're joking, kind of, but
once again, this message is for the FBI and the CIA. I am not endorsing anything that has to do with sedition.
Well, listen, it's I think the core issue is states' rights versus
one of the things I think we stumbled on a perfect example. Right, here's the thing. I know you think sedition is an antiquated word from our colonial past or something like that. But here's one of the things that you cannot, that your free speech, your right to free speech does not entitle you to. You are not allowed to talk, to promote sedition. That is against the law.
And think about that. And I used this example a couple of weeks ago that how crazy is it that the oppressor gets to tell you, what you're going to do and say and think and your actions? Well, that's the whole point is of course they want to retain power. Of course the oppressor wants to have their thumb down on you. So
who's the oppressor?
Well, this is a hypothetical example, right? But look at places like North Korea. Why haven't these people, charged Kim Jong-un and said we want our freedom back?
Because they can't buy a fucking Slim Jim. They got nothing to eat.
I know, right? And it's just crazy that shit like that can happen around the world. Hopefully it never happens in this country. But I do maintain this. And so I'm throwing it out as a question like I always have. And if this becomes illegal, then, I do have guns.
Once again, the views expressed on this podcast are not necessarily those of everybody involved. Go ahead.
But here's the question. Have we not outgrown that idea? We have, 50 states. We have this massive landmass. We've talked way back when about the origins of the Constitution and the 13 colonies, and we're, of course, way larger than that now. The population of this country has only grown, and I'm for immigration. I like everything that comes out of people moving around is better than people staying in one place. Mm-hmm. Everything from agriculture to innovation to capitalism to bringing people out of poverty, all of that is good, okay? And so when you look at immigration as a hot topic in this country, that has only, first of all, we're a nation of immigrants, and second of all, that has only made us better. It has only made this place a better place to live. However,
are you running for a Democratic
spot
somewhere?
Of course, I would never do that. But the point is, when you have larger and larger and larger groups of people coming together, of course you're going to have diverse opinions and diverse ways of thinking and ways of solving problems. And so I just wonder, do we not have a common approach of how we're going to go forward? Is that possible with how big we've become?
I think what's happened is that there is that as both parties. So let's not talk about for a few seconds here. Let's not talk about the entire country in terms of Democrats and Republicans. Let's just talk about the country as a whole. Whatever your political affiliations are, there's probably more of a class issue here than a political issue. So, and I got to be honest with you, you're not going to like this either, but this has a lot to do with wealth distribution. So as the wealth gap becomes more and more stratified and higher and higher amounts of wealth are concentrated in the upper 3 or 4% of people in the country, the class situation starts to deepen and become more of a concern. And so the middle class and the top 1 to 3% or whatever it is look down on and tend to not take the feelings of the lowest part of the lowest class into consideration on a national level. That has resulted in those people feeling left out, and those people were then reached by the Trump movement, right? To our very that is a very dangerous situation to have let happen. We need to identify this, Travis. It's not a matter of, hey, we need to split the country up. That won't fix this problem. We need to, as members of the Republican Party or members of the Democrat or Libertarian or Independent, as members of the non-Trump disaffected people that we currently have, we need to try to understand why they exist. Why are they migrating to this terrible political outlook that we see, that we see what we now call the Trump politics or the Trump movement? Why has that happened? We need to figure that out and answer those questions and address those problems, or else it will be the end of us. So, on a serious note, I get the our common kind of trend of talking about, hey, it's too big, and yeah, some of that's true, but it doesn't have to. The answer is probably not splitting things up, because our great strengths and our security in the world depend on us staying together. Trust me. The minute we divide into these kind of stratified nation states that you're talking about, it's over, because the authoritarian dictatorships of the world, the communist countries, China, Russia, India, soon probably to be, the Middle East, we will be gobbled up and spit out by the rest of the world, because we've been fucking them for 50, 60 years.
Yeah, and I'm not an expert on international diplomacy, but I think that probably is the biggest argument, in my opinion anyway, the biggest argument for keep going down the path we're going to protect ourselves from, here's go back to what you said, the class issues in this country. And yes. I think that conversation where I immediately get lost is in the phrase wealth distribution, because of course that goes against my capitalist principles.
Did I say wealth distribution?
I think you did.
Well, I mean, used as a verb, I can see where that would be. Hey, we need to better wealth distribution. We're not distributing the wealth correctly. What I meant, what I thought I said, or what I should have said, was wealth gap. And I'm not saying that the people that have accumulated their wealth don't deserve it necessarily. But I mean, it's not something we can ignore and just say, hey, because of some capitalistic dream state that we don't really have, that shouldn't be addressed. It will be the ending of the country if we don't address it. It needs to be addressed, and not in a way that you take the wealth, just outright take it, that you confiscate the wealth, but it's going to be addressed in taxation schemes or something that are going to make more sense. And I think it's always going to be like that. I think it's an American ideal that we have that to aspire to, right? So I don't think anybody that wants America or democracy in America to succeed thinks that there should not be a 1%. We all seem to want that, right?
I don't know. I question that.
I think even if you're outwardly saying eat the rich and redistribute the wealth, somewhere in the back of your mind you're going, unless I'm getting some of it, then it'll be okay. So we need to remember that. And so I don't think any of us want to be left-wing Democrats that are unaware of some amount of hypocrisy in that. We also need to be aware, as a political party, as a movement, that we don't really want to change that. What we do want is there to be less of a gap, because history is, if you ignore it, whenever societies get in this stage, this is what tears them apart, not outward pressure.
Yeah, and I think that is probably the primary area to focus on, is the gap, because if you're someone who makes $50,000 a year and then somebody else makes $1 million a year and you're going to take more of their money because they deserve to pay more, their fair share, the other guy still makes $50,000. He didn't just magically get more money because you took more from the guy with $1 million.
Well, I think that's a great way to look at it. And the answer is not taking the millionaire's money. The answer is policy that does not allow inordinate amounts of wealth to accumulate at the top of the class.
I disagree.
System.
I think that it shouldn't be driven through policy. I think it should be driven through opportunity.
But it doesn't work that way.
I know, but get your solutionary hat on.
Well, I think that those are the solutions we need to work for. How do we gently curve this trend of wealth concentration at the top of society the other direction, right?
I think the way I see it is, I think that's a good, healthy way to look at it, is the gap. If the gap was
less,
right, and whatever the threshold is, if the gap is still the gap, and that's the problem. But I just think the goal, you shouldn't want to punish success, and that's what I see happening on the far left side of the political spectrum.
Well, can I say that I think that the tendency to want to punish that by Democrats or liberals or whatever is not the cause of the problem. It's the symptom. And when you let the wealth gap get so large, that is a symptom. That is something that happens because of that. And you can stop that from happening by fixing the root problem.
But I see it that it's not that the wealth gap was let to do anything. What I see is that there needs to be more. I just see it as innovation and training. And so let's, again, broad strokes here. Mm-hmm. The wealth gap exists because why? You have people who are on the spectrum that are entrepreneurs. They've created the idea. Maybe it's tech, maybe it's whatever. We have the high profile names that we can think of. And then you have the workers who are just labor,
it's
right? It's education. And it's not just four-year school education, it's training.
Yeah, right. And here's the thing, right? We have, I think we're getting somewhere in this conversation at this point.
Thank God.
When I say education, it's not like, hey, free college for everybody.
Yes.
Kill all your debt that you accumulated on your own. Well, if you made those stupid decisions,
right,
then whatever. I'm talking about the future. And as a society, these are the kind of things that we can change and control that will help lessen the gap, right? So here's the thing. How come the gap is forming, right? The gap is forming is because we've let Ivy League and higher education providers become drenched in the idea of exclusivity, right? It's like, hey, and we talked about this before, these fucking Ivy League colleges brag about how many people they turn away, not how many people they educate. And that needs to be changed. We simply need to figure out a way to provide better, higher education to more people, because education and training is the grease that allows people to slide up and not just fall down.
And I would say relevant. I would add the word relevant training in that. I mean,
right.
what happened like in your day, right? Good old fashioned trade schools.
Well, back in my day, we used to telegraph each other about where we were going to school. Hey, click, click, click. I'm going to.
Didn't you have did you fill out the test to see what you were, what track you were on?
The bad news is I was part of the hippie generation. So, I wasn't planning to go to school. I wasn't planning to live past 30. I wasn't planning to do any of that stuff. I think that's all dead and gone. I mean, as much as I'd like to hang on to my hippie roots and, all that stuff, it's dead. We need to provide lubrication for people in the lower classes to move up, and we're not doing that. It's not a complicated thing, I don't think, to be honest with you. We need to take control of these providers for higher education, and we need to make regulations, laws, tax breaks, whatever we need to do as a society to make it happen. Right?
But shouldn't it be also looking at, I mean, again, you look at these schools, there's got to be programs that are just totally and completely irrelevant. Like if you go to school, I went to school for communications, never graduated.
But here you are.
Yeah, here we are podcasting,
See?
but that's a totally irrelevant skill, right? I mean, that's a fucking bogus degree.
No, but Travis, in the 17 or so years that I've noticed you, we've worked together in trade associations and things. And one of the first things that I noticed about your talents is that you were a good speaker. You were able to communicate well, right? And one of the reasons why we can have these conversations is because you are a good communicator. These things we talk about are complicated. They're emotional.
Yeah,
they're fraught with danger for discussion, right?
But listen, that's something learned, right? And something practiced, but it doesn't have to be done into school.
No, but I think it would be hard to quantify how much, value that was to you. I mean, I don't think it can be the fact that you had some higher education in that field can't be discarded. You're not a good communicator by chance. You learned some of this, and some of it you probably learned there. But either way, trade schools, here's the thing. We don't want to use some of the terms that might have been, came to have negative meaning. Like,
oh, Jesus, that's been canceled now too? That's PC to say trade school?
No, I don't think so.
Oh,
I just think looking back over it, it's like, are you going to college? No, man, I'm going to trade school. It doesn't carry the same, status. So we need to change that as a society. That's just a way of looking at things that we need to change. We have to, and that's why we have to understand that, remember that having the status, having the 4-year college or the Ivy League college or the 6-year college or whatever, having that be the only thing that's valued by, say, business in America, that needs to change. Businesses need to change that for their own good. But, it's hard because it's hard for them to see that. Yeah, promoting schools and hiring only out of the top Ivy League schools, that's what propagates the gap, right? And here's the thing. We need to change some of the systemic racism that's out there in these things, right? When the only way you can get a job that pays in the, that could bring you that could elevate you in this society is to go to an Ivy League school, get on the fucking squash team, and then, sit around and talk to people at the squash club afterwards, or because you're sorority or whatever. Those kind of things need to be banished, just done away with, right? And so that there's a better way, right? So, but that's, those are perpetuating things that happen at the upper end. We used to call it the old boys club. I think that phrase is kind of going, but it's the same thing, right? Nobody gets a job at what's the big financial institution on Wall Street? Lehman Marcus what is it? I don't know all these names.
Yeah, I know the big banks.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
You don't get those jobs.
Goldman Sachs?
Yeah, you don't get a job at Goldman Sachs by filling out an application. You get a job because your uncle knows somebody on the board, and you went to the right school, and at the squash meeting or the tennis club or whatever the fuck, white privilege thing you're involved in, you get picked up. That needs to change. And that changes by making access to higher education of all types, whether it's trades or broad education, more egalitarian and more accessible, right? And not based on the fact that, you shouldn't have to have your parents shouldn't have to be millionaires to put you through higher education. So, I mean, this seems like a complicated problem to solve, but the wealth gap in this country can be solved by better access to higher education and training, and a government, regardless of whether they're Democrats or Republicans, that looks to the future and tries to see what the long game is and what's going to be good for this country in the future. Not how do we go back to some nonsensical ideal from the 50s? How do we make America great again? That is a reductive, backwards-looking, idiotic philosophy. Anybody engaged in it needs to wake up. That's not good for the country.
The idea of the 50s and the middle class,
50s sucked. Okay? So did the Middle Ages. So did living in a fucking cave.
But don't you think the way people worked was different, right? I mean, I think people stayed at their jobs longer. This whole notion of, I don't know, pick a factory worker, right? You were an assembly line factory worker. You worked there for 20, 30 years. You had a pension. Not a lot of upward mobility maybe within that company, but you had stability. And over the years, probably, I don't know, by the mid 80s, 90s, I think the culture changed where people don't stay at jobs as long as they did. Even, hiring young people now, we see a lot of that. We see a lot of people who are bouncing around. Used to be a negative stigma like, oh, are they a flight risk? You don't stay around too long. But I think ultimately what it comes down to is there needs to be skills that people have that are worth something. So whatever it is, and I agree with a lot of what you're saying. Yeah. I don't know that it's a combination, right, of higher education. It's a combination of overall training. But when your only skill is one thing, and maybe it's a thing of a certain value, there's not enough stimulus money. There's not enough government intervention that can improve your skill. You have to improve that skill, and you should be provided opportunities to improve that or learn other skills. And I think that's the way out of closing the wealth gap.
Yeah, I think we just both said the same thing.
Did we?
Yeah. I mean, again, I often feel that the answers to some of these big questions that are so important are not nearly as complicated as we think. And I don't think that we're as divided on it as we think, or as it sometimes appears. When we talk about politics, obviously the political world is vulcanized, galvanized, whatever the fucking word is. It's there's this huge gap, and it really has a lot to do. It's this gap. It's a huge crack through society that's running through it, and everything is related to it. All these issues are related to it. And we can make a multitude of issues better by pulling our heads out of our asses, getting out of these stupid social media cliques that we're in, the echo chambers that we live in now for information, and look to the future and get over ourselves a little bit. Hey, you don't have to hate the wealthy and want their money. That's rabble rousing. That's groupthink, right? We want there to be less of a gap. But it's not about taxing them into submission. It's not about revolting. It's not about attacking the Capitol and making the government you want, that kind of stupid, idiotic shit that happened on January 6th. It's about making things better on a broader platform and making access to. Look, the future of this country is not factory workers.
Right.
It's just not. Right.
Yeah, and what you said, I think you have to point that out on both sides, and that's exactly right. And that's why I get so frustrated with, for example, some of the policies out of the Biden administration on taxation in particular, because, again, it is just punitive. There is, to my knowledge, no really in-depth discussions about opportunities, skills, closing wealth gaps. It's just simply, we need more money, and here's how we're going to get it.
So I think if I was to say, well, that's all the Republicans' fault, that's all Mitch McConnell's fault, that I just don't think I can say that truthfully. I think that's partly part of the problem, but there's a lot of partisan bullshit on the Democratic side. But I will say that once again that there's no hope of making any progress on these fronts when one of the two parties involved feels comfortable saying, our only goal is to stop you. He should be arrested for that, frankly. That's just, I mean, and I say that, I don't mean that literally. What I mean is,
if he can say that,
he should be arrested by his political party and his leadership position taken away, right? You don't want the leader of your political party because there's no reason for the Biden administration. They know that the only things they're going to pass are the few things they can get through on reconciliation. When you do it on reconciliation, and hopefully everybody listening to this knows what that means.
Yeah, we've recounted that.
You don't have to do anything. You don't have to negotiate anything. Doesn't everybody understand how bad that is that Mitch McConnell says, hey, we're never going to negotiate with you on anything. All we're ever going to do is obstruct you. And then they will turn around and they will call. They spent the whole 4 years of the Trump administration talking about how the Democrats were obstructionists. It's just nonsense. And it's not the Democrats doing it. It's the Republicans, because they're disintegrating, and there's nobody to arrest Mitch McConnell in that party.
But again, this is how it's supposed to work, in the sense that at some point the people, they better get fed up with that type of attitude and say, hey, you got to get to work here. You got to get to work and start governing. And so whether or not it's, people within the Republican Party who say, I got shit to do, we got, laws to write and votes to cast, so I'm going to go over here and get that done and abandon the core, and it disintegrates. I mean, that's really what should happen.
No, it's up to it's up to the people that do not agree with that Mitch McConnell philosophy to continuously make sure it's known what's happening, and that's where we're at. And so none of that stuff fixes itself, I can tell you right now. So we need to talk more about.
Didn't he almost lose his seat this last go around?
It really wasn't that close.
Was it not?
No. I mean, here's the thing, right? 2020, not a winner for the Democrats. I mean, I think there's a lot of people, especially in the Trump world, that only get their information one place, that think that somehow this was some huge victory. We only won the presidency, the executive branch. We barely, through a fluke, took control of the Senate. And that's it. That's not strong for the Democrats, right? So there's nothing guaranteed in 2022.
Look, you're going to get the biggest win of all through the Supreme Court with stacking the court. You'll get there, my friend.
Oh my God. There's a move for one of the older Clinton era appointees. It's going to come to me because his name rhymes with retire. And so Justice Breyer should retire. There's a movement. Last year, there was a truck driving around. Well, let me think here for a second. What was this? In the last year of the Obama administration, there was a truck with a big billboard on it driving around the Supreme Court that said, Justice Breyer, please retire. Right? Because the thinking was there, get out so Obama can appoint. This was before the Merrick Garland fiasco, right? Again, there's a perfect example of something that should never have happened. Yeah, there was no law that Mitch McConnell broke by not providing hearings or anything for Merrick Garland for 10 full months during the last 10 months of the Obama administration. But it's just another example of something that has disintegrated. That's very bad for the country. It'll be bad when it goes the other way, right? So here's the thing: they're talking about Justice Breyer should retire. He's even older now, right? He's 5 years. He's 5 years older now, and they're saying, "Look, get out," because the Senate, the ability for Biden to pick a nominee and have a nominee put through is fleeting. It could end tomorrow at any moment. Any one Democratic senator could die or become disabled, and that's it. That shifts the balance of power. We're no longer in control. So there is no time to fuck around, okay, for Democrats and the control of the Senate. So as a parting soliloquy, I'm going to say this. Democrats listening to me, get your shit together. Focus in on 2022. If you don't do things that are you've got the presidency for 4 years. Don't worry about it. Focus on 2022. Don't worry about 24. Trump's old. He ain't going to run. It's 22 you need to worry about. If they flip either of these houses, just one of them, your time is done. That's whatever the last thing you did before 2022 as a Democratic Party, that's the last thing you're going to do for quite some time. So get it together. That's my advice for you as a group. Focus in on some of the things we talked about today. I think that the core Democrat strategy is good right now. Focus on things that people think need to be done, right? Unlike the Republicans who are just focusing on grievances and nonsense and cult of personality and is Trump the leader or isn't he? Is he the Fuhrer? Yeah, he's the Fuhrer, right? So get it together, but then make these things realistic, okay? hey, if they're not going to engage with you on negotiations on the infrastructure, make some of the changes that you thought you were going to have to make when you thought they might negotiate with you. Set some kind of example. Do something that moves things forward. You can still pass the goddamn bill through reconciliation, whether the tax rate goes to 28 or 25. Don't do it. Just don't go to 28 just because you can.
Yeah, and my message to Democrats would be, please go away. Republicans are a disaster.
Now that is unity right there.
Republicans are a disaster, of course. They're imploding. Trump, he needs to go away and die at his golf course. But your policies are terrible. So please just go away.
For the Secret Service, once again, I would like to say not all these opinions are shared by both people on this podcast. All right.
You had enough, my friend? You want some more coffee? Are you good?
No, but the coffee here was delicious.
All right. Thank you. I will tell people if you want to yell at me for my comments about splitting up the country, you can email us at info@couchfuneral.com and blah, blah, blah. And that's it.
All right.
All right, everyone.
See you next week.
Bye.
Bye.